Well, this morning, Fayette County Clerk Don Blevins Jr. spoke with the Lexington Forum about this year's elections, laying out the good, the bad, and what he thinks we'll see in future elections. LEX18's Claire Kopsky takes us through what Blevins says was a hectic but successful year in our big story at 5:30.
Every election year is bound to be busy for a county clerk, but add a pandemic and a presidential race, and well, it was unprecedented.
My poor staff, we were working, all of us, 7 days a week, starting in September 1st.
But before the general election was the pushed back primary in June, that in Lexington had only one in-person voting location on election day, Kroger Field. Blevins says he's grateful Lexingtonians listened and says 95% of voters voted by mail. But the rest stood in lines, which Blevins says were longer than they should have been, because every few voters were either an independent voter who couldn't vote due to no bipartisan offices on the ticket, or people who brought absentee ballots, who changed their mind and wanted to vote in person, which they couldn't. He says those voters added hours to the lines. But overall, Blevins says the primary was a success with a strong turnout.
The Secretary of State himself has said there were 0 cases of fraud in the primary. I want you to absorb that. A record number of absentee ballots, 0. I can say that for sure for Fayette County because we checked every daggone one of those ballots and all of them were good.
Something Blevins says he hopes is here to stay is what happened after the primary. The relaxing on absentee signature rules, which he says in Kentucky have historically been incredibly strict.
In the primary, we rejected 7% of the ballots.
Okay.
That's a lot of people.
That is.
It was like 7,000 ballots. In the general, it was under 500.
Thanks to requests from the governor and secretary of state, Kentucky offered what Blevins called the kitchen sink of options for the general election. Early voting, mail-in, as well as an election day. Something he says won't be possible again unless the legislature approves a building to be built or rented for weeks surrounding each election.
You got to remember our legislature is heavily Republican and they don't like mail, voting by mail. So I would say the odds of that happening are pretty low.
Okay.
Early voting is a maybe. That's the one that's going to be unusual because you're going to see a Secretary of State, Republican, probably advocating for early voting, and you're going to see county clerks saying, no, it's not practical. And I hate to say it out loud, but I'm in that camp. A lot of people want to do early voting to increase turnout. Turns out it doesn't do that.
Blevins says he is very interested to see what the legislature decides, as he thinks there is intense pressure from voters to offer multiple options going forward. In Lexington, Claire Kopsky, LEX18 News.